Good morning. Welcome to Thursday, April 16th. This is a good way to start here with this Star Wars reference. You have Obi-Wan, Luke, you must learn the ways of the Force. And Luke, I'm ready, Obi-Wan. And then they show it being done on a online format like we're doing. And you can see the silliness that is happening right now with us. In Star Wars, it wouldn't work either. So I do think that some of this is working, but this is obviously not best. That's indicated by the fact that I've been grading papers, and even though I'm very, very proud of the people that have turned them in, um, I think there were only 3 students I didn't get them back from, and I've got stories from those three about what's going on and why they haven't gotten those back in, and I think we're doing okay as far as doing work and turning it in, but there's some goofiness out there that we need to probably correct over the next couple videos. One specifically is on equations, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to point out that yesterday's assignment, if you've read the email, you already know this. If you haven't, then you probably emailed me asking for clarification, or maybe you haven't done it yet. So first thing is, though, that this wasn't in the packet. I don't know why. It's in all my stuff. I think maybe the copier skipped this page and ran it through and stapled it. I'm sure it's a magic error and not mine. It's something that just happened. So not my fault, although most likely it probably is. But anyway, this paper is in Google Classroom. You can do this if you want. You weren't going to be able to do all of your work on here. You should use notebook paper because remember, and this is very, very important, I'm wanting you to show your steps. Now, you aren't showing your steps on the equation papers that you're doing that I'm getting handed in. And I know that because I went through all 26 packets that were filled out or that were turned in, and only two students were showing their steps on the latest assignment that I looked at. Those 2 students are Riley and Wiley. So if your name rhymes with Smiley, then you probably are doing it correct. But if you're not doing it correct, which would be most of you, you really need to pay attention to today's video. Okay, so that page right there is actually going to be turned in. This is the Google Classroom page, but it's optional. If you think you've got a good handle on equations and you know how to solve them, then you don't have to do it. Now, I just said that you weren't showing your work correctly, but that doesn't mean that you don't know how to solve them. Today, the assignment is a great way to practice showing your work correctly. You see I've got a few queued up there, but again, there's not room to work. I know that some of you would take that as a challenge and do it anyway and try to get those papers or try to get those problems worked out on there, but that's not the proper way to do it. They give you a little paragraph here about the Dutch artist, and you're supposed to unscramble to get his name. That's a handy way to do a worksheet because you've got the answers down there at the bottom, and you can always check your work easily. Okay, so I'm going to pick out 4 of these that I think might give you a little bit of trouble, and we'll work through them. And I want to point out a few little tricky things as we go through. So on problem number 2, and I skipped number 1 because it's a lot like what you've been doing over the past week. And number 2 has this little cluster here of subtract and negative, and I thought we could review that real quick. So anytime you have a subtraction problem, remember you can change that to add the opposite. We might try to work it both ways, but the first way I want to show you is that you don't have to do anything with it. You can just make sure that you use the inverse operations correctly. Okay, that this would be the opposite of subtracting, or the subtracting the opposite is actually just like adding, right? So that can get really confusing because the opposite of adding is subtract, so we actually have to subtract the 6 off of this side to get it. Okay, let's work with inverse operations real quick. This is subtraction. I want to add the opposite. Remember this little guy, little smiley face. Add the opposite. Okay, so now it's just m plus 6 equals -5. Remember the other day when we were doing our information about how to uh, solve equations, the first step was to rewrite the problem. This is our rewriting of the problem, okay? Then we had to identify the variable, that's m, and the operation, which is now addition, and find the inverse. So what's the inverse of adding 6? The inverse is subtracting 6. Okay, so we're going to subtract 6 on both sides. That's showing our work. If we wanted to, we could include the m plus 6 minus 6, and we would have the -5 minus 6 in here too. This is the only part. This is the only part that we added in here, that we put in there. Added in is dangerous because we actually are subtracting that. And that means that -6 and -6, over here it's going to cancel this out. That was our goal, was to isolate the variable. We're going to get rid of all of this mess and just have m plus 0, or if you choose to skip that and just put m, then that's okay too. And then you have equals -5 minus 6. So if it's -5 degrees outside and it goes down 6 more degrees, that's -11. Okay? If you were to look at this problem from the beginning, your brain did not have an 11 in it, I don't think. Some of you may be telling me I'm wrong. But on number 2, when you look at that right there, I can almost guarantee that you see these negatives and subtractions in your brain pops in a 1. Okay? If it says 11, that's great. You know to use that. But then you have to decide whether it's negative or not. So this is why we've been practicing showing our steps, is to make sure that we get the correct number here. Okay? It's not so easy anymore to just pop an answer out. I know it was on a couple of those assignments, and you probably argued with your parents about, yeah, but why do I have to show all my work when I know the answer? Well, the point is that the answer isn't really the issue. It's solving the problem. It's working the steps. It's acquiring this skill, not the mental math skill. You already have the mental math. What we're working on in 6th grade is the inverse operations and how to get better at this. Okay? All right. So they give you a blank over there. I just put it over here, m equals, and you just plug that in. And then you go down to the bottom of the sheet and you put that in. In this problem, if number 2 is m, then you go down and you find your -11, and that's m. So if you were just trying to guess the answer and you put in a 1, you'd have that option here. There's no 11, so you would know that you did wrong. If you missed the sign, you'd have to go back up and check. And if you just get so confused that you can't figure it out, email me. But tell me problem number 2. I have a couple people that are sending me emails. I just don't get it, and then they give me no more information than that. I don't know what you don't get, so you have to be a little more specific. Number 7. Number 7 looks pretty easy, and it kind of is. In fact, you could use a little mental math here. If you have something plus another something, it makes a bigger something. So in this case, you need more negative numbers, and you need to add -4 numbers, and then you get -10. So, like this is how many bad guys plus 4 bad guys equals 10 bad guys. Well, you should be able to get that one in your head. Okay, -6. But again, that's not the point. The point is practicing the skill of showing our steps and doing the inverse operations. So in this case, we're adding -4. Well, what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is subtracting -4, right? Well, look at this. Subtracting -4 is actually adding 4. So you have to cancel this out. You have to add 4 to both sides. Add 4. Okay? You've taken care of that here. That goes to 0. G plus 0 equals, and it's -10, or the 10 bad guys, and you got to add in 4 good guys. So you're going to end up with -6, basically working the problem backwards, which is what you do in your head anyway. But this is practicing writing this step out. Okay, You're doing the inverse operations to isolate the variable. Okay, g equals -6, which is exactly what, in this case, we thought it would be. Okay, this is a case of where showing your work is harder than just doing it mentally, which is going to happen as we practice through these. Remember, we're not practicing with the super hard problems, we're practicing with the easy problems. If I gave you the super hard problems, you'd have more trouble with the interaction between multiple variables or decimal places and fractions, and the arithmetic would get in the way. So we've given you the problems with the easy arithmetic to practice with. Okay, number 8. I don't like number 8 on this page, but I know why they did it. They needed to be able to use the letter O. O isn't used as a variable very often in mathematics, and you can probably see why, because this looks like a 0, right? When you get into upper mathematics, when you're using a lot of O's or omegas, a lot of times the symbol looks a little bit, the symbols all look similar. So in mathematics, they often will put the slash through it to indicate that it's a 0. Now this was just an O, so that wouldn't have a slash. Or they use lowercase letters where a 0 looks like a capital O. So that's just something to know for later. In this case, you're just using this as a variable, so it doesn't matter what the symbol is. This is a missing number, and you solve this one a lot like you did the other problem. In this case, you're subtracting 4. The inverse operation is to add 4 to both sides. So you have this right here, O equals, and then you've got a little integer operation here, -9 plus 4. This is why we practice integers, 4 or 5 worksheets. And you've got -9 plus 4, -5. Okay, so that one wasn't very hard. Same thing here. Once you get this inverse operation thing taken care of, then you're going to be pretty good at it. Here you've got -8, or subtract 8. What's the inverse of that? Well, adding 8. Adding 8 to both sides. N stays by itself. You're going to get this n plus 0 and 15 bad guys, 8 good guys. Looks like you're going to be left with 7 bad guys. Excuse me. Now, up here, I didn't include the plus 0, and up here I didn't include the plus 0, and that would probably complicate things. But remember, that's an optional step right there. This is what you get points for, showing me that you know how to apply the inverse and then come up with an answer. One more thing about this, and then I've got to quit preaching at you about the proper way to do equations, but it is important, and I promise it's important for later. That's my job as a 6th grade teacher, is to make sure that you know the proper steps and the proper procedure for solving these types of problems, so that you can get into 7th grade and 8th grade without a big struggle on these. Okay, remember, we're working always in a vertical fashion, that this line and this line have to equal. We've cheated a little bit here by leaving out parts, but as I told you earlier, you can include these parts of the problems, and that would make that line equal to the line above it. Every line is equal, okay? Even though we have 2 equal signs here, we can still be equal as we go down, all right? And that means that whatever this is, this formula right here, is still the same value as this, okay? We've just simplified it down to where we know that n equals -7. And let's go back and review something else. We can take that -7, plug it back into the problem, and that's the answer we get. So we got -7, and I'm going to rewrite this equation, but this time instead of n, I'm going to substitute. Remember that substitution property? I'm going to substitute in the -7. So -7 minus 8 equals -15. So -7 minus 8 equals -15. If there's -7 degrees on the thermometer, you drop 8, you're ending up at -15. -15 is -15. That's proof. It's true. Whatever you want to write there. That's checking your work. Okay? The nice thing about this assignment is that if you don't find a -7 down here, you know that you've done something wrong. You can go get help from the smartest person in your household, or you can email me if you want. Okay? I'm getting quite a few emails, but I'm not getting a lot of specific emails about questions. Um, I I don't know what that means. I was a little bit disappointed throughout the first 2 weeks, thinking that I wasn't going to get anything back, and then bam, there's a giant stack of papers, and everybody's done some great work. Okay, the only thing I have to complain about is we're not showing our work for equations, and there are a few of you that are skipping around and maybe not finishing assignments. If you've chosen to not finish an assignment, or you think that you got it, for instance, on this one right here, if you want to just do the odds because you've been really good about working equations, and you know that you have because you've been able to check your work, then I'm okay with you skipping and just doing just the odds. But if you're still confused at the end of these, and you're leaving the assignment and you're like, well, I got it done, but I'm not real confident with it, then maybe you ought to solve some more problems. Okay. Um, I do answer sheets every couple days. I just make the answer sheets, but I don't publish them. Um, if you want to grade your own work, we used to do that sometimes in class. I can send you the answer sheet. Um, know though that a lot of these answer sheets, they're just going to have an answer, and you know what your answer is worth? Almost nothing without you showing your work. So be sure that you show your work on your assignments. Okay. I think that's it for today. We will. I might do another video after a bit, working with some of the Explore equations. If some people need some help, just email me what your thoughts are. All right.